Welcome back to the City Ramble. Straight into it, Joe. Like I said in part one, we've had time, we've had rest, we've had all the training photos, which I feel like this week has been an insight into what it's like to be, I don't know, a Fulham fan when you've got, pretty much the rest of the league competing in Europe and you're like, oh yeah, X player is in training or B player had a funny video. Haaland scored a good goal in training. Regardless, there will be no Nathan Ake because Nathan Ake, again, has picked up an injury. I can't remember where it was said, but there was rumours, going back a few months ago that he was playing through an injury. I think it was the same for Akanji as well. Sign of the times, basically. But Joe, bitter disappointment because we know what he is when he's fit, but he's another one of those defenders this season that just hasn't been fit.
No, it's him and Stones are in exactly the same camp of... I mean, I don't want either of them to leave because when they're fit, they're incredible. Like, I think if you can keep Nathan Ake, this is a huge if. If you can keep Nathan Ake fit for even like 3 to 4 months, like consistently, like you've got a almost a nailed on starting 11 player. I think he's that good. I think you'd have him with Diaz and. I mean, maybe Kusanov at the moment, to be fair. And it's just a shame that, that he's had a year where, I mean, to be fair, so many players in the team have had a year where they've just not been able to stay fit for more than a couple of games. And I think it's been compounded by the fact that whenever he has come back, he's had to go straight into the 11. Now, it's a bit frustrating this time because the Madrid game, maybe you could say that he had to come back in. But otherwise, a lot of his times that he's been rushed back have been very sort of, I don't know, avoidable,
unnecessary.
They've not necessarily required an instant throwback into the squad, and I think it's no. I don't think it's any. I don't think it's any great mystery that him and Akanji have both had to undergo surgeries after going through that sort of ringer of just return from injury, thrown back into a starting 11, another injury, return from injury, thrown back in start. That has effectively broken them, and now they're both recovering from surgeries that they both had to have, which. I'm hoping that surgeries feel like a thing that hopefully kind of should, in theory, fix a problem. So I'm hoping that this means for Ake that maybe next season he is a little bit more reliable and maybe it's less a case.
Does he make it that far for you? You mentioned Stones there.
On the other side,
can City go into the next season with both of them?
Yeah, I mean. It comes down to the wages, doesn't it? Really, because I don't think. I mean, I'm not hugely convinced you'll get a massive amount of money for either of them, unless like someone like Saudi Arabia is getting involved. And I'm not sure either of them are really the kind of players to have the appetite for that kind of move. And yeah,
also I don't think either of them are the type of players that Saudi's going to come in and think, yes, here's how we get eyeballs on, the Saudi Pro League is by bringing in Nathan Ake.
John Stones is you could potentially see the argument for, but I wouldn't. No one's going, God, I've got to watch John Stones this week. Are they? Like, it's just one of those things. But I think
I agree with you. If we're talking John Stones,
speak for yourself.
Functional. If we're talking John Stones and he actually can play, I would agree with you. The problem is that we haven't seen a John Stones that can play consistently, really at any point of his City career, other than the run into the treble.
Yeah, I think I think in terms of the summer, I would mean. So if we just accept that at the moment we have Diaz, Kusanov, and Hayes maybe as three centre backs that we have, Akanji as well. So that's 4. Can we realistically go into a season with 6 centre backs if 2 of them are Stones and Ake, who are kind of intermittently in and out of the squad? I think potentially yes. But also if the club want to maybe like upgrade one of the defensive options, if they want to just go, right, maybe we want to get rid of one. And if you have one kind of like Stones or Ake, who's just going to be in and out every now and then, and if you've got them, great. If you don't, then it's kind of expected. You probably need one of the other 4 to be a Ruben Diaz level talent. And maybe Kusanov is showing signs that he could be that. But you're not going to bank on that being the case for the next season, are you? After a great start, so yeah, for me, I would say, based on sort of the lack of resale ability on those 2, I'd maybe look to Akanji as one they might look to get rid of because he's pretty. He didn't cost a lot to bring in. We could probably get a decent, because of his age, we could probably get like 30 plus mil for him if he went to somewhere that needed him. I'm just spitballing here. Yeah. And then that's money that you can more realistically invest into a replacement centre back rather than, scraping together like 10, 15 mil for one of Stones or Ake and then being like, right, well, do they both have a year left on the deal as well?
I believe
Stones,
so. End of next
I think
season,
Stones does. Yeah, so I mean, the contract situations are different there, which affects their asking price as well. So yeah, I mean, it's very much a question mark, the centre back situation going into the summer. But I would not be at all shocked if one of Stones or Ake, or maybe, you know what, if it was both, I wouldn't necessarily be totally blindsided. I think when we need to look at that position as it is, two players with the availability record of those two isn't great.
I'd feel more confident if we weren't going. If this was a non-tournament summer, and so those guys were just going to get time off.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
But with the Club World Cup, like our squad isn't going to get rest.
It's hard to sort of give that too much credence because I imagine Guardiola will want to win it, but that's as much as a preseason tournament as you're probably going to get, isn't it?
So, talking to people inside the club, it's being treated as the way they would treat a major, like the players are going to have full training routines. It's going to be like, it's just extending the season. It's not being viewed as preseason.
That is a disgrace.
No,
it's because of the amount of money.
I think there's exactly. There's a difference between what the club are fronting up because of the finances on offer and what Pep Guardiola will actually do. Because if it starts looking like the players are just going to die, he's not, because I believe City won't have this will be their pre-season because the final is like a week before the new. Yeah, look, whatever the club want to say, I think when push comes to shove, and this is sort of a complete U-turn, so we'll get back onto Forest. But I think when push comes to shove, I'm not saying like it will be a youth team every single game, but you can see 45 minutes. You can see like a whole host of changes.
Nico O'Reilly will be involved in a few games and stuff like that. James McAtee will suddenly come to the forefront out of nowhere. Like I think that'll be the kind of team.
I can't see it being sort of full strength 11s every game. Speaking of, we've got plenty of football to come before that. Who knows if we'll still have a football club by the time that rolls around, Andrew. But on this Forest game, defence has been the conundrum for City for most of the season. Depending where City have been, you've kind of been able to put together a midfield, not a very good one at times. You've been able to cobble together an attack, a bit of an efficient one at times, but that seems to be changing in recent weeks. Defence has been in my opinion, the constant issue throughout this entire season. Obviously, no Ake, so Gvardiol, I assume, starts for everyone. Yep. Do we go Kusanov-Diaz? Is that City's best centre-back partnership now, do you think? Only centre-back partnership, I guess, excluding Reece.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, one, it's the only one, but also I think that given our lack of legs across most of the pitch, having a guy like Kusanov there who does have that recovery speed, does have that physicality is just so important. And frankly, I have been pleasantly surprised by his ability on the ball compared to what I thought it would be. So,
yeah, sounds good. Joe, obviously, Kusanov would take that centre-back partnership position next to Ruben Diaz. Right back, Nunes played well against Spurs. Does he get back in your team?
Yeah, it feels like Nunes is kind of the obvious one. I think just for his, if we're going to be worried about pace going the other way, I think his athleticism is probably more required for this than what Rico Lewis does. I think if we knew we were going to be coming up against 10 men behind the ball from minute one, then Rico Lewis is absolutely the guy to sort of put into this kind of game. But with us being worried about counter-attacking pace, then which is probably the reason why Nunes has been playing over Rico Lewis for so long of this season. I think Pep realised that transitions are where we're just being absolutely murdered. And unfortunately, I say unfortunately, he's actually done a pretty serviceable job there. But unfortunately for Rico Lewis, that means that Nunes is much better suited to that than him. So
I think particularly against Elanga, like Elanga, would absolutely destroy Rico in transition.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're probably looking at that being the case. I'm actually quite. I'm actually quite glad that you were mentioning sort of in terms of the rotation that we've been able to, or not the rotation, but the rest we've been able to do. I'm quite glad that Gvardiol didn't see the pitch against Plymouth last weekend, because obviously him getting 10 days off is massive, because he's one of the players that we've been able to give the least amount of rest. I've not looked at the minutes played this season, but my guess is he'd be top
it's scary.
2 or 3. Yeah,
it's
if not
scary.
top 1. So yeah, him coming, us having fullbacks who, are well rested and actually able to, not look like they're in the red zone from minute 1 is going to be is all very good positive for me.
I believe in the Premier League he's 2 minutes behind Erling Haaland, according to
if
FB
you
Ref.
do all competitions,
Yeah,
for City
he's
this
number
season,
1.
He's number 1.
Yeah, he's number 1, 60
3,251.
minutes ahead of Haaland. Oof, Bernardo Silva there in 3rd. Wow, you could make Rico Lewis in 4th. Wow,
What a guy!
You could make all sorts of conclusions from that list. Andrew, midfield is starting to resemble what you might want a midfield to, not necessarily Manchester City or Pep Guardiola midfield, but it's starting to look like what you might want a midfield to look like with Nico Gonzalez in there. Again, he's a must. Is there sort of big picture on this? Is there a fear that the new players who've come in who were kind of brought in to, bolster up the squad a little bit, take the pressure off the other guys, for good or for worse, for better or for worse, they're kind of now indispensable themselves, aren't they? So it's maybe a good thing that you don't have that many matches to play, because if they start going down injured, then well, I guess we're just back to square one.
Yeah, I mean, as far as midfield for me, Spanish Nico definitely makes it. I wouldn't hate English Nico, because I thought he was quite good against Plymouth Argyle, and I think he's shown a good amount. But my guess is we're probably looking at Nico Gonzalez, Gundogan, I would guess.
Mm.
And then...
Is that just for tempo setting, do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I could also see it being Kovacic, maybe. I'm trying to remember who... Kovacic played against Spurs. Did Gundogan play against Plymouth?
Gundogan, I believe. Kovacic, I want to say, came off the bench.
I think. Yeah,
I think you're right. Yeah, came off the bench. So... either one I think I'm fine with, but Gundo's a little bit better on the ball, and I think we've seen, since Nico's come in, we've seen that Gundogan still has something to offer. And then I'd probably go with Foden as the third midfielder, kind of in the 10 position, and then Marmoush, Savio on the wings, and Haaland up top.
Okay. Joe, Jeremy Doku, obviously great against Spurs. Forest will play a low block. Can you make the case for him?
Well, he was great against Forest in the return fixture, wasn't he? At the Etihad.
Yeah, he certainly was.
He was really good that day. I mean, I wouldn't hate it. I think he's in a pretty good vein of form at the moment. Like, I think, whatever you thought of his Liverpool performance, he was bright, and he absolutely destroyed Trent Alexander-Arnold. Like, made him look like an absolute chump for however much time he was on the pitch. So, I mean, I wouldn't hate seeing it. I think it's when you've got a player who's looking like that, and obviously he looks great against Spurs as well. Then sort of keep them in the team, really, I would say. But also at the same time, if he wants to bring him out and put Marmoush out on the left, and as Andrew said, maybe have Savio going out wide the other way, or anything like that. I mean, we're at the point that the good thing about this now is that we're at the point where it isn't a foregone conclusion anymore. And I think this has kind of been the best thing about where we're at now compared to when we first played Forest, is that we have genuine options in a lot of these positions. It kind of felt like that Forest team, with the exception of, Grealish got put into midfield because we didn't have many other midfielders to pick from. Whereas now we're at a point where, we've actually got midfielders to choose from. We've got wingers to choose from. Like, obviously Haaland is always going to be just like locked in at this point, but it's not a case of, these wingers are now being really bad. We just got to keep rotating out the ones who are playing badly until we stumble upon one that's doing well. Like, we have Doku who's been doing well last few games. Savio's looking very promising every time that he's on the pitch. Foden is having a pretty indifferent season, but I think when he comes from out wide on that right hand side and comes in from there, he's actually been pretty, he's been looking better since the new year started, I think. It's good to have all these options, really. I would personally say I'd quite like to see De Bruyne come into this game. but
Okay.
I've been well, I mean, I wouldn't play Foden in midfield. I'd probably play if we're going to be putting Marmoush out on the left. I'd sooner see Foden outright than. I mean, to be honest, you could toss a coin between those two at the moment for Savio and Foden outright, but probably I would maybe edge towards Savio. And if someone's going to sit out this game, I'd probably pick Phil over De Bruyne, just because I think that his chance creation against a midfield that is not going to be anywhere near as necessarily dynamic, and obviously they've got Morgan Gibbs-White, who's like a very sort of pacey, dynamic player in their midfield, but we're not playing against like a Liverpool midfield or a Tottenham midfield or anything like that that's going to make him look like a 40-year-old man. He's going to play against midfield where he can probably have a bit more time on the ball and maybe do a little bit more with it, and be that chance creator that is ultimately like at this point certainly is his number one asset that we need him on the pitch for. Even if he's not going to do much of everything else on the athleticism side of things, if you can have one player in there, because obviously, as Andrew said before, if their game plan is going to be to sit deep and hit us on the counter attack, then having someone who can just thread a pass through out of nowhere against a lowish block, De Bruyne is that guy more than Foden is for me. So I would, on the basis of that play, I would start De Bruyne. But I get, as I've said, we're at a point in the season now where they've got the availability of some players and some players who are in decent form, where there's so many combinations of the team now where I'd be quite happy to see it. Like I'm not really too hung up on who does or doesn't start at this point.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. Anyway, 12:30 kickoff. Even though kickoff times probably shouldn't matter, it does feel like they throw up the odd surprise here and there. I believe the last 12:30 kickoff Forest played at home, they won 7-0 against Brighton. So hopefully that isn't an omen as far as City are concerned. That was the first part of the show. If you want more, make sure to check the City Ramble wherever you get your podcasts from.